What's good, YouTube? It's your boy, Max Minus here. Welcome to the lab, where I teach you how to level up your beats. Today, I'm going to show you 2 secrets that the industry's best producers use to make dark and catchy melodies. So stay tuned, you don't want to miss out. If you like the video or any of the content I provide, please hit the like button, show some love, hit the subscribe button, and hit the bell notification because you do not want to miss out on when I drop these production gems. Without further ado, let's get into it. Alright guys, so secret number 1 is to make a melody that corresponds with your tempo. Alright, so for secret number 1, we're going to be doing a little bit of a case study here. I basically recreated the song by Drake called Back to Back. It was the Meek Mill diss. So go ahead and check out, listen to this as an example of a melody with a fast beat. Now I put the BPM on 174, so I just put the original BPM into double time, just because it's easier to work that way in my opinion. So yeah, it's a faster tempo of a beat. Check out the melody in terms of like the speed of the actual notes. This melody is an example of just a structure of chords using half notes basically. Okay, so if you know anything about half notes or quarter notes, they have a decent amount of spacing in between. Whereas in an example I'll show you later on in the video, when you're using triplets, 16th notes, or even 8th notes, there's less spacing in between notes. What Drake's producer did for this is he slowed down the melody because the tempo is faster, right? We have spaces in between each chord. Now here's an example of, so I basically took the same melody in the chord progression and I just, I'm pretty sure I double timed it. So I reduced the spacing and this is what it sounds like without having good spacing. Right, so I don't even want to play that anymore because it's super muddy. The melody's way too crowded. It just sounds like a bunch of noise basically. So I think that Drake's producer did a really good job with, especially with the synth, creating spacing in there to not only not overcrowd the beat, but leave some room for Drake's vocals. Because in that song, he wanted to make it very clear, or at least I can imagine he wanted to make his vocals very clear while producing a diss track. So that's actually a really good example of making a melody that corresponds with a fast tempo. Now I'm going to show you guys an example of making a melody that corresponds with a slower tempo. So I also put this beat into double time. So the actual time is like 57 beats per minute. So check it out.
Max Minus.
This is an example of a slower beat that I was able to speed stuff up with. I'm using quarter notes and triplets. So you can see the triplets here. It's basically whenever you can fit 3 notes inside of one beat, right? So here's the first beat right here from line to line. Okay, so, but you'll notice that, yes, I did speed things up, but I didn't do triplets during the entire measure, right? So every beat, I take a break between triplets, so I'm just not crowding the melody the entire time with triplets. So it's literally 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so there's definitely a balance in terms of just having spaces within the melody. Okay, and then here, so I added a bit more in here and I sped things up, but you can still hear the spaces in between the triplets and other parts of the melody. So go ahead and take a listen. You can tell I definitely sped things up. I added more components to the pattern, but if you listen to the first pattern here, so you can see here that I have breaks in between the faster triplet notes. So I'm basically using quarter notes there, and then for the next compartment of that melody, I'm using triplets, and then I'm using quarter notes, and then I'm using triplets, right? So I'm going back and forth. So for this pattern here, the other layer, you can see the spaces in between the triplets, and like I said before, I'm not crowding the entire melody with triplets. All right, so there's an example of effective spacing in between the notes of a melody, even with a slower one. So you can tell I sped things up a little bit, but I didn't go overboard with it. Okay, so there's definitely a balance involved. Basically, the summary of secret number 1 is for faster beats, you're going to want spaces in between the notes of your melody. Slower tempo beats are going to have less spacing in between their notes. Okay, so that concludes secret number 1. All right, secret number 2 is to create a melody with a natural minor progression. All right, guys, so for secret number 2, it's going to be working in the natural minor progression. Okay, and if you don't know what that means, it's not a big deal. It's actually pretty easy to explain and to show. So I'll show you on the piano roll. I'm just going to open up FL keys here, go into the piano roll, and I'm just going to start off on D or E. Okay, so for a natural minor, it's going to be really off-putting if you make a melody that doesn't stick to the laid out progression, right? So there's a system to music, and if you don't follow the system, it's going to sound really bad. Okay, so but it's okay. I'm going to show you the system and how you can stick with it and how you can make melodies. Now, you can probably, as a producer or somebody who's really interested in music, you can probably already hear the difference between being in the key signature and being out of the key signature, right? It will be off-putting and you'll know something's wrong. And if you just go through your notes and fix it up a little bit, you should be able to figure it out. Now, for those of you who are interested in music but don't have the ear for it yet, it's okay. It just takes practice. And like I said, I'm going to explain to you how to stick to the system, okay? So here's the system. Really simple. You start on the root note, okay? In this case, the root note is E because it's the first note that I put down in the scale, okay? So if we go from E, we're going to go a whole step up from E, okay? So a whole step up from E is actually 2 half steps. So from key to key, if I go from E to F, that's actually a half step, okay? Because they're right next to each other. So a whole step from E, right, is 2 half steps. I'm going to go half step, okay? So a whole step from E is going to be F sharp. So we start off root note, and then we're going to go whole step, okay? Now we're going to go from the whole step a half step, okay? So it's... Now we're at G, okay? So the system is whole step, half step, whole step, half step, whole step, whole step. And I'm going to follow that. Ready? Whole step, half step, whole step, half step, whole step, whole step. Okay? If you end on E, because if we're doing 8 notes, there's, and you know, if you don't know what an octave is, it's literally 8 notes away from the root note. So whenever you are doing a natural minor progression, whatever note that you start on, if you start on E, you're going to end on E, okay? That's one way to know that if you lay it out just like this and your last note or your first notes don't correspond or match up with each other, then you did it wrong, okay? So maybe when you're making it, you start with the first and last and then reverse engineer from there, okay? So just so you can hear what the scale sounds like in succession, this is what the natural minor scale or key signature of E sounds like. Okay? It sounds fluid. It sounds good. And we can tell that there's nothing really off-putting about it because everything follows the system. Let's actually make a melody right now. Let's make a melody, a short little melody. I'm going to speed up the tempo a little bit. Let's go to 150. We'll make it a little bit faster. Let's make a cool melody in E minor, okay? I'm going to put the metronome on. I'm going to remember the first principle that we talked about, which was spacing, and I'm going to make sure that with a faster beat at 150 beats per minute, or technically 75 beats per minute, then I'm going to use proper spacing. And I'm going to create some variation here, which we'll actually talk about. We'll talk about that as one of the secrets later on. I'm going to create some variation right now, and we'll stick to the main topic. I'm just creating tension at the very end. Okay, so let's check out that melody all the way through. So you can see I'm clustering up. I'm creating spaces in between those bursts of 16th notes. And I'm actually going to add another progression. Something that you guys you probably haven't noticed, but I really like to put scaling notes or arpeggio-like systems into my melodies. If you don't know what an arpeggio is, that's okay. I'll go over it in my next video, because I don't want to cover too much material on one video. I won't have enough time. So let's hear what it sounds like. That sounds pretty good. So you're probably wondering, Max, how do you know if you're staying in the same key that you started off with? So I'll just double check right now. So I'll start at the root note, right? I'll start at E. I'll go a whole step, half step, whole step, half step, whole step, half step, right? So I started on E, as you can see right here, and I ended on E. So I know I at least got 2 notes right. I'll go through and see if it sounds congruent, and if I notice any notes that are off-putting, then I'll fix it. Awesome. All right. So now what I'm going to do, because my melody stretches over 2 octaves so far, I'm going to copy paste. I'm going to overlap it, right? Because E is the same, so I'm just going to overlap over. And I'm specifically going to look at the gaps here to see if there's any notes in the gaps. And as you can see, if I'm just going to look over, I got E, C, B, G, F sharp, C, A, and E, right? Well, look at that. I got E, F sharp, G, A, B, C, and D, right? So I'm sticking to the system. There's no notes in this system here that are going to A sharp or are going to G sharp, right? As you can see, there's nothing on this line, there's nothing on this line, okay, etc., etc. So that's how I know for a fact that I'm sticking in the natural key signature of E minor, okay? Okay, so that's secret number 2. That's going to wrap up the video for now, guys. As always, thanks for watching. Don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, and hit the bell notification, because you're going to want to know every time that I drop these gems. Until next time, peace.